Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. Let's get started with our hosts, Linda McKissack and Dana Gentry.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. I'm Linda McKissack.
And I'm Dana Gentry.
So, Dana, we're super excited because we have met a new best friend. I don't know what, a month ago, 2 months ago. We now he's our new favorite person.
You all even trapped him in a plane to get him to get more time with him.
I should have told the pilot to loop around a couple of times. We need a little extra time.
If I'm your new favorite person, you need to get out more. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I think that we need so much help that we need you as our new favorite person. But we have Dr. Henry Cloud with us today. And honestly, Dr. Cloud, we are wondering where the heck your trust book has been all of our life. It's kind of like Susan Scott's Fierce Conversation book. When we found it, we really needed it like 20 years before. That's the way we feel about your trust book. We have talked about it every session since we met you. So I'm super excited. Why don't we just start off by, I always like to say you were born and then what happened, but you can do Cliff Note version, of course.
I don't remember being born, actually.
Me either.
Me either.
You know, there's a little funny story about that. My mother was way too old to have kids when she got pregnant with me, and nobody thought she was pregnant. They didn't even think about it. She was having all this pain. So for the first 4 months, I think they were giving her daily Demerol shots.
Oh.
And I never had heard that story. Then I went in for surgery a few years back, and they said, "Are you worried about your surgery?" I said, "No, I'd had a lot of surgeries." And I said, "I'd do anything for that Demerol shot." And they said, "Why?" And I said, "I just feel like I can't describe it. I see how people get addicted. I feel like I'm just floating in love. I can't describe it." And my wife starts laughing. And she says, "Well, of course you do." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because you were fed Demerol in the womb for 4 months."
Oh, Lord.
So that's probably why I don't remember. Yeah.
You're probably right. Well, the good news is you weren't born in chaos. I mean, you were all calm, and
that's probably why you are the way you are. Yeah.
Yeah, I need a little speed or something to bring me back to the normal range, I think.
to the normal level. So talk to us a little bit about kind of your background, and it was very interesting. We just met you at John Maxwell's event not too long ago, and really enjoyed kind of your backstory of how you kind of got to where we are, and we got to the trust book.
Oh gosh, well, I'll try to make that short and just contextualize it to the last part of how we get to the trust book. When I went into the field of clinical psychology, I went looking for my first job, and I knocked on doors, and I got hired by a leadership consulting firm. And this is before executive coaching and all that. But I don't know if y'all noticed this, but they had discovered that leaders have issues. Now that's a profound insight on their part, right? But they wanted somebody to work with, CEOs and teams and stuff on interpersonal stuff and, their own issues. And so I fell in love with leadership since day one, and ended up doing my doctoral dissertation in leadership personality. So I've had two parallel tracks for many decades, both in leadership and in the clinical world as a clinical psychologist. And, I quickly learned those are not two worlds, because you can go study all the leadership stuff in the world, and then, you got to go out there in this place called reality and do it. And that's where people discover their own issues begin to get in the way. And so, they'll go see a shrink, and the therapist will nod and look at them and say, "Yeah, I see you're struggling in your work. Must be painful." Well, that's all our time for today. And so I started to hear from a lot of leaders that, the therapy thing wasn't helping them. And it started to make sense that they needed to look at the personal issues, but this needs to be approached from what the context of leadership and high performance does. And so I developed early on this kind of niche space that was technically, all the stuff about leadership, but how does interpersonal and how do the interpersonal and personal issues interface with that? So that's where I've been hanging out for a long time. Along the way, I've been in practice about 5 years, and my business juices were kind of bored, and I wanted to do a faith-based or faith-friendly psychiatric hospital, because at that time, people, their faith was seen as part of the problem, right? And so went out and raised the money to buy a hospital, because I figured, if you own it, you can do whatever you want. So, but we couldn't get a deal. And so I changed the model and started going into med surg hospitals and taking over an underperforming wing, converting it to psych. And I was going to do one hospital, and the company just boomed and ended up in 40 markets in the Western United States with treatment centers. And so I ran that company and was a clinical director for a long time and sold it. And after that, so what I really, really love doing, and it was working with high performers in leadership. So since late 90s, about 2000, I've devoted most of my time with working in businesses with CEOs and their teams and cultures and high performers in various arenas. And that's, you get called into 1,000 situations, and you don't, whether it's performance or culture or whatever, and you're there about 10 minutes before you are into some issue that involves trust. And so that's been very, very important for a long time. Finally, I've been teaching this stuff in companies, and finally decided, I should just write it down. So that's where the book came from.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
awesome.
A long. You probably didn't want that much, but that's
that's good. Well, you just said something that made me think, though, because one of the things, obviously, you're also very well known for many books, but Necessary Endings and Boundaries Before Trust were huge. And it just kind of hit me when you said that it might be geared towards high performers and or leaders. But the thing that I personally love about all three books, and Linda and I have talked about this, you can use them in the workplace, and you can also use them personally in your personal life with your personal relationships. And there's not a lot of books that you can do both, like they are good for both. And that is just, I think that's incredible about all three of them.
Well, Dana, that's kind of, you're saying exactly what I discovered very early on working in leadership. It's people that have to do it. And so our issues are going to get in the way or make us better. Harvard did a gazillion-year study on high performance in companies and businesses, and you do all this research and you look at everybody, once they get to a certain level, like the C-suite or high performance, they all look alike in terms of IQ, background, business acumen, education. And then you have this group that goes way higher than the rest. And 90% of that variance was caused by this stuff. They kind of lump it into emotional intelligence or other things. EQ, but it is the personal stuff. You read the Wall Street Journal, the front page every day. There's some companies in trouble, and whoever got them in trouble is not an idiot. I mean, they know what they're doing. It's generally these issues with customers or clients or boards or employees or their own. Maybe they're, instead of ready, aim, fire, they're fire, ready, aim. You got an ADD impulsive leader that buys the next shiny object, gets them off vision. It's all the personal, interpersonal stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I've always heard, it's autobiographical. You can't separate personal and business, because one's going to, if your personal life's a mess, it's going to bleed over to your business and vice versa. So
it's true.
In the trust book, let's say you got two people, but Dana and I are both in leadership. So we have a lot of people that we have to coordinate to work together, right? And you tell a great story in your book, but when you've got people that you can see from the outside that they're either lack of people trusting them or them trusting other people is really just kind of bottlenecking any more opportunities for them, for the company, for anybody. Is there a possibility to help those
and it
people see
can't
that?
be, it is bi-directional. You know, it's both sides. If somebody may be really trustworthy, but their trust muscle is broken going the other direction, and they can't really let go of things to let somebody go do what you need them to do. You know, when all of us probably took life-saving training, you know, and as a teenager, and first thing you got to do is somehow disable the drowning person so you can help them. But they're trying to take over and micromanage you, right? Why? And so the letting go to let somebody go scale your business, for example, or you're never going to grow anything if you can't trust people. But you're really going to screw up if you trust the wrong people. And so that's the, you know, what I got into in the book was the subtitle is When to Give Trust, but When to Withhold It. And be able to see the things in people that, you know, they're honest and have integrity and all that stuff, but I can't trust them to do this because there's certain other factors in there. So it does go both ways. You're right.
Yeah. And do you think people's inability to trust comes from, I know you tell a story, I think a guy's name was Sean or whatever, but do you think people's inability to trust comes from either one, like their behavior, like some behaviors are afraid of, you know, looking wrong, some behaviors are afraid of being taken advantage of, or do you think it's like a past experience, even maybe at childhood or whatever? Where does their lack of ability to trust someone else come from?
I had that same question because you say in the book that we are wired to trust.
Yeah.
So I had the same question, Linda.
Well, we are wired to trust. I mean, it literally, the whole human organism, biologically, neurologically, psychologically, is wired first and foremost 24/7, every second of every part of your existence. Your whole system is asking one question before anything else. And that question is, am I safe? And I'll use examples sometimes, you know, you've been breathing for the last minute, right? You didn't even know it. Your system trusted the air. See, that's trust. It's made a determination the air is okay to breathe. And so now you can go sell real estate, right? But if you smelled a fume, that algorithm, or if the sensors on your skin started to feel a temperature change, or your eyes started to water, you're gathering data, the system is running, and all of a sudden you smell that fume and you go and you hit pause. Well, we are wired like that interpersonally as well. You're wired like that when you walk across the floor. If it creaks, you stop. And so people will have issues. Sometimes, we're all constitutionally wired with different temperaments, et cetera, and there is a let's just call it hardwiring component to this, where some people, you go in a nursery with the newborns, you look through the glass where they're all wrapped in little burritos, right? And in the little cubicles, or what do you call those things? I don't know what you call them. And you're looking at the window, and one of them sitting there, bah, 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 bah. They're just happy with the world and what the world brings them, and they're trusting fine. And then the one right next to them, they're like, they're the future attorneys, right? They're already kind of wired for a fight, right? They're litigating from day one. So there are temperament things, but by and large, we are formed in our experiences in life. Number one, what happens to us, good or bad, and also how we experience those experiences. And that's a big deal, because you see some people that are horribly abused, and they have had experiences to experience that experience where they grow past that and they become people that help abuse people. You see some people that are abused and they experience that or don't experience metabolism and they become abusers. And so you've always got this interplay between nature and nurture, and also how we have experienced those experiences and what we've done with them, A, and then B, and this gets to leadership development, what new experiences rewire our system. And that's what we call growth. And that's kind of the world I hang out in, because, you guys have hit a nail on the head here that it's like a merry-go-round. We are so hardwired and soft, it's like a computer. You got the motherboard, which is the neurological hardwiring the brain, but then there's software that sits on top of that. And that's the coding that we learn about patterns in relationships. And we're going to operate according to that software until we get the bugs out or download some updates. And that's what we call growth. And thank God we can do that.
Yeah, you just hope you can see your blind spots in it.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? That's there you go. Now, how am I going to see my blind spots? Well, if I can't trust somebody to point out my blind spots, I can't assimilate that new information, accommodate it. You got some people, you give them feedback, they instantly devalue it, they reject it, they don't trust anything if it's not their thought. And try to sell a house to somebody like that. Y'all are mostly in the residential world, right?
Yeah, and Dana and I are both in leadership. We own market centers and regions for Keller Williams, and we've started out selling. Then we moved to the leadership side. Yeah,
but a lot of experience in that industry, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, you just think back to the last dozen transactions you did, and you get a really untrusting client.
Yeah.
And we're talking about exactly what Covey said a long time ago. When trust is down, speed goes down and costs go up. Now we got to have 46 inspections because I don't trust the last guy. Now we got to have 46 more attorneys in here. Trust is a big deal. Big deal.
I did have a quick question on the experiences thing that you were just talking about and how people experience those versus how they're hardwired. How much of that do you think does or doesn't have to do with genetics? Like I keep hearing people say, oh, well, it's just in their genes, or, oh, that's just, well, everybody in their family's been like that, so it's just in their genes.
Well, that's what I was talking about earlier. There is hardwiring to this stuff, but you say, well, everybody in their family's like that. Well, family is more than genes. A family is parenting and siblings and a bunch of other stuff that writes the software.
Right.
So it's, in some ways, here's kind of the big problem. I was going to say, in some ways, it's a fool's errand to begin to try to figure out which is it, but that's not altogether true, because some of the biological stuff is biological and we can treat that. If you got somebody, let's say they're high functioning, bipolar, right? Well, on the proper medication, they can be as normal as anybody else, but there is a biological issue, right? Or somebody's got an overactive amygdala and they need an SSRI, and because they're having, hypervigilant anxiety all the time. But most of the times, to ask, is it genetic or is it whatever? When my computer's not working, I can still download the update, right? And I don't know where it came from, but we know how to treat it. But it's a great question. It's a valid question, but we don't always have to eat. You do an inspection on a house and you notice, there's a leak in a pipe under foundation. You can ask, well, was that the plumber that did that when he installed it, or did it fall off the truck on the way, or was the galvanized, material not right? I don't know. Let's just fix it. How about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, totally.
But you keep down or double clicking on these little windows that there's a lot underneath it, because part of the question also goes to something really important, which just drives me crazy in this whole space. And that is, sometimes I'll say, well, that's just the way they are. They've been born that way or whatever. And we get into this whole problem, and this is what a lot of the assessment tools do. Somebody will take a test, and whichever typology test it is. And they'll look at this, well, say it's a Myers-Briggs. Well, I worked with a guy one time, he said, I'm just a J. And I mean, he's driving everybody crazy with his rigid, controlling, behavior. And I said, I literally said this it was a question in a large gathering. And you can edit this if you want, but I said, you just keep telling me you wear your J-ness like a badge. And, the Myers-Briggs on that scale, you're either a J or a P.
Yeah.
I said, you wear your J-ness like a badge. I said, you've got to embrace your penis too. And the whole, and then I realized what I had said. And what I meant was, you got to integrate the other sides of you.
Yeah.
Because that test itself comes from a system that Carl Jung developed that said the polarities, when we're only one side of a polarity, we're not integrating as a human being. And so some of this stuff where people say, well, that's just what I am, these are my strengths, or whatever. Certainly we have strengths, and it's a good thing Tom Brady plays quarterback and not middle linebacker.
Right.
But everybody's got to be able to get into a huddle and listen to each other. Everybody's got to be able to execute the play. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got to be able to stay in their lane and stay in their role and let their teammate do what they're supposed to do. Everybody's got to know what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to defend against. And so some of this, that's just the way he or she is. Well, that's right. That's how they are today, but that doesn't mean they have to stay that way. Mm-hmm. And they don't get a pass. I'm just artistic. Well, get a calendar and show up on time, or your art gifts are never going to take you anywhere.
Yeah, so you have to ask, how's that working for me, right? I mean, is that helping me get what I want, or is it an excuse I'm using?
That's right. And the assessment tools are great, and we do have wired and software strengths and all of that, and we should stay in our lane in a way, but you don't get a pass on being a kind and responsible and dependable human being that's able to execute something towards, fruition. And it just sometimes will drive me crazy when people try to use it as an excuse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So after, this is one of those things after reading, the 5 essentials of trust, the understanding, the motive, the ability, the character, and the track record. It's one of those things where you think, okay, now that I know this, I can't pretend I don't.
Now that I know this, what?
I can't pretend I don't. In other words, these are those things that when you look at it, almost everything in your life where there's something going wrong can point back to one of these 5.
Yeah.
I know. It's just, well, that's what I set out to do, was to try to, I'm a big one in teaching leadership and working with leaders and high performers. There's so much literature out there. I'll go into an executive team sometimes and say, okay, you guys lead this company together, hand them a 3x5 card and say, I want you to write down, what is leadership? And I'll get 8 different answers. And they're all right, but they're not the whole thing. And so when it came to trust, what I did was spent a long time just kind of trying to factor analyze the whole banana, from neuroscience to psychology to business to leadership to personal relationships. And when you factor analyze something, you take all of this stuff and the statistical models ask, well, we're looking at 1,000 things. How many things are we really looking at? And then you find a lot of these things are really talking about the same thing in different words. And when I did that, I came down to all of the trust literature and science really is talking about 5 categories. And that's where and so I like to build models so people can, instead of worrying about the last 14,000 leadership things that we need to listen to, how about a little yellow post-it on your screen that says, am I deeply trying to understand this person, or do they understand me? What are their motives? Am I going to win in this? Do they care about me and my side of the deal as much as them, and vice versa? Number 3, they might be a great person, but do they have the ability to pull off what I'm trusting them with in this context? Number 4, what about their character makeup? I'm not talking about just morals. I'm talking about how they're glued together. They're great, but they got an anger problem. I can't send them into a conflictual situation, and how do they have the perseverance that this deal is going to require? And so you look at the personal makeup, and then the last one is a track record. What happened the last time? It was the best predictor of the future until something changes is the past. And so once you start to understand those 5 things, and you can do team retreats on this, you can read customers, you can read people you're going to hire, you can read yourself. And I just find simple models really helpful.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the questions I was going to ask you is, what would you suggest you people do with this? I found myself thinking, gosh, this needs a workbook. You just got to go back through this so much. What would you suggest? And then my question to you is, when a corporation calls you in, do they usually call you in after they're like in some mess they can't figure out? And then what's your first step when you get there? Or walk me through you going to help a company.
That's like, that's exactly like somebody, you ask a cardiologist, when does somebody call you? Well, sometimes they don't. The surgeon does when the guy's on the table, because he never thought about it until it was too late.
Yeah.
And you got other people that, I've kind of noticed every now and then my heart starts racing. I think I'm going to go see the doctor and see what that's about. And then you got other people, our highest performers in every NFL player or NBA player, they're getting checked out all the time.
Yeah.
And so that's a great question. And when I get called in, it's one of those 3 scenarios. It's great performers who want to get greater. Okay. Tiger Woods has a coach.
Yeah.
They're the great ones. And what I found is the great ones utilize coaching more than everybody else. That surprised me. I thought it was the calls that we get to the people that are in a mess would be calling me all the time. It's the highest performers that I hear from the most.
Wow.
So that scenario. The second one is, we're doing really well, but there's this one issue in the culture, or there's one issue in the team, or one issue in this person, or one thing in me, a pattern, and it's just not changing. We're not getting past that. We could do so much better if we could get past that. And so that's the second scenario. And then the third one is, sometimes about ready to blow up. And so I get that call. And those are, they're always the most difficult, right? But I always want to have 1 or 2 of those in the bandwidth of everything I'm doing, because that's really where you learn the most. It's
so in all those situations,
really difficult ones.
Yeah. In all those situations, do you go in and have the same process you follow? Do you start out with questions with them? What does your process look like to figure out where in this 5 we got problems, or is that how you do it?
And do you think all the five are, is there one that like stands out more in these bigger kind of C-suite levels, or it's just a combination of all the five? I feel like those kind of go hand in hand.
It's two different questions. Let me go to the first one because it'll lead to the second one, about the process. One of my favorite proverbs is, it says, "He who gives an answer before he understands is a fool."
Mhm.
And another translation says, "It is a folly to me." And so, I mean, I've got a general, it's like, any doctor, whatever your specialty, you have diagnostic trees, right? So you're going to come in, certainly there's a template of, what normal looks like, what good looks like, and there's something, you're looking at that gap all the time. But I don't have a standardized process. And I'm not decrying that, a lot of consulting companies, that's one of the reasons in my leadership practice, I've never really scaled it because, but a lot of companies do, and they have a lot of, but they have a process, and the consultant will go in and work the process, right? And those are really good. What I found is I want to go in, and usually there's somebody that calls, right? And I want to understand, why'd you call me? And so in that question, you begin to get a picture of the tributaries of where this issue is coming from. And so sometimes, like Linda, I'll go in and say, okay, well, I'm going to come here for a day, and I want you to schedule, give me 90 minutes with everybody on the executive team. And so I'll do a round of interviews, and that will lead me more to designing the process, that because it may be, what, everybody here is great, but you got this one, they're the ones that are causing all this infection. And so I'm gonna hit pause on working with everybody till we're going to do a little deeper dive with Joey. And so it's a one-on-one situation, but sometimes Joey might be really struggling, and it's not Joey by himself, it's a system problem. And sometimes the infection may be being acted upon the system by a board or the private equity firm that owns the company, and so you just kind of figure out, what are the capacities that are lacking in somebody. If you're sick, you got an infection, we got to treat the infection, but sometimes the immune system needs to be strengthened. And so you got to figure out for the process, do we need to change this whole culture, or do we need to get the CEO to rein in the COO who's making everybody crazy, or so. But the process is going to include, there's always, you're always, when you're changing behavior neurologically, behavior runs on hardwiring. So if we don't have the neurological patterning, to, you can't pick up a phone without a wire that goes somewhere, right? And so some people don't have the wiring for that different behavior, and we got to build that. And so neurologically, to build the hardware and the software to change our behavior, the first thing we have to have is awareness. So I'm getting to the process question. Any process that's going to work, it's got to start with the person's got to they got to know what you're talking about. You say to some people, you got a trust issue. They go, what are you talking about? I don't, I've got integrity. I don't lie to people. So we got to make them aware of, you don't lie to people, but you're doing some other things that really make it hard for people to really trust you. So they got to have awareness of what those things are, what the behaviors are. But here's where it fails so much. People come in and do a training. And I just said, you got to have that, right? Or they do an assessment, or they go to a workshop, or they read a book. That's great. Now we have the awareness. But if all you got is the awareness, all the research shows, within, I don't know, some brief time period, that's kind of gone, right? It's sort of like I'm going to tell my kid one time, homework's a good thing. You should do it. Well, got the awareness. But but then you got to go from the awareness to the second thing is that there's got to be focused attention on that issue in real time. Okay. So now somebody knows they got this issue, but now we got to design some sort of process. So as they are working, it's being brought to their attention. So the prefrontal cortex can actually attend to it, because that's going to start to begin to drive the new thing. I can read, I'm a competitive golfer all my life. I can read about the golf swing, but until I go on the practice range and start to focus on, and my teacher points out, okay, that time, remember we talked about you got to take the club back on this path. Well, that time you took it too far inside. So somebody's got to focus my attention when that old wiring is running and go, oh. And then the third phase is there's got to be deliberate practice of the new behavior with relational support running all the way through it. And so whatever process we're going to have that's going to work, it's going to include those elements. And so what I've tried to do in the book is give a lot of examples of how you take people down that railroad track. And that's how behavior changes.
So if you were going to use this book as a retreat, what would be your suggestion? Everybody read the book. And is reading the book where we're trying to get people to have awareness, myself included, awareness.
And so now you're talking about if I did it or if somebody just took it and did it?
Yeah, like I mean, to me, I want to take this book farther. I don't want this book to go sit on a shelf, because I think there's so much value in it, and you won't get it one time through.
Yeah, no, you won't. It's sort of like I can read a cooking book. You wouldn't want to come to that dinner. But I go to a Michelin star restaurant, he's read the cooking book, or she's read the cooking book too, but she's done a little more than just read the book. What I would do is I would everybody read it beforehand.
Okay.
And then I would, and depending on how much time you got, you could do this. I've talked to a lot of executive teams who have been using it, and they'll say, we're going to devote, 6 or 12 weeks to this we're going to add an hour to our weekly meeting, and we're going to go through these 5 things. And so, for example, and should I speak with a lot of real estate examples? Does that help, or
sure?
no?
Yeah, I mean,
or leadership or real estate.
Okay, well, let's just expand to leadership. We're going to talk about number 1. The first one is understanding. We trust people when we feel like they understand me and what I need. They understand what hurts me. They understand what I'm afraid of, what causes me pain, but they understand what I really need to win, what I need to succeed. All right. So that's number 1. A quick example. I got called into a big technology company one time. They'd had a huge product launch failure, and kind of read about, in the papers. And we go in and start to do kind of the post-mortem. So what happened here? And I'm working with the team and the CEO. We start to go to look at what I got distracted because you started smiling. I hope I didn't
Well, I
mention the
smiled
name.
because you said postmortem.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought, did I mention the name of the company? I hope I didn't do it. Everybody would know it. So we go, yeah, we're doing the postmortem. I mean, the product launch was DOA, right? So we look at it, and what had actually happened was you had the sales team out there selling this technology to big customers. And the customers would say, well, you know, can it do this? And they go, oh yeah, we can build that feature into it. That would be, that's doable. So they're promising features, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're never really talking to R&D and understanding their side of the table, what's going to be involved in that tweak that you just promised somebody.
Yeah.
And there's no way in God's green earth that they could do that by April 1st.
Yeah.
But now every customer has been promised this, right? And so what if, rocket science, what if we had a team that went around the table and say, okay, for me to do my job well, here's what you guys really need to understand that I got to have from you to do it well.
Mm.
And do you get what it is like to be in my chair? And when you start to do that around a team, and not to cast blame, but to listen to each other, then it's unbelievable. What, I'll give you an example. What happens to costs? And a real estate company do this, or know of one that did it. I know that the CEO, he transformed a lot of the home building business way back, you know, decades ago, because you're building out a tract of homes, and everybody, all the subs would come into their work, right? And you got a timeline. Well, that timeline is money, because you're still paying, you know, for the land till you sell it. You know, you got construction costs, you got, you know, the construction loans, all that. So what he was noticing was nobody's bringing all the subs together before we build the development. And let's find out what they need from each other. And you start to hear, you know, the roofers say, well, we could do it a lot faster, but we can't ever even get in the driveway because the concrete trucks are, you know, they're doing theirs first, but we could already have our materials their way. So they start working together and understanding what they need from each other. And his carrying costs started to go way down because the timelines changed, because they understood from each other what they need to be successful. It's like a marriage. And so I would take the 5 and I'd sit the team down, or with a boss and a direct report. What do you need from me in order to win? Because here's what I need from you in order to win. And we really understand each other. And what that also does is, instead of having things we quote ought to do, it takes it to a whole new realm that drives behavior more than anything. And here's a great business term for you: love.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you start to see that the chaos and pain you're causing another person by not doing what they've asked you to do 10,000 times, because you're really listening. You find out, well, you don't get those reports to accounting in time, and we got a mother who's got to sit there over the weekend and miss her daughter's ballet or something. That changes people's behavior because they're listening to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's a big deal. So I would take the 5 and I'd have them just start to talk about it.
Break
And
down. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
you go to the abilities one, number 3. Does somebody have the ability to pull off what I'm interested in? I had a team not too long ago that somebody was kind of responsible for, you know, for executing a certain task. And finally, the team got together and say, you know, you are so great at this and this and this, but this other stuff you're doing, you suck. And he goes, I know. I can't. And they go, let's give that to somebody else because we trust you in it. But I had another one. They sent, they had to renegotiate or no, get out of a lease on a huge property warehouse. And somehow they trusted, didn't think about it because they're such a good performer in a lot of different ways. They trusted this guy to go out and get him out of the lease. And he's so codependent and Mr. Nice Guy and can't disappoint anybody. And he got in there and he realized, oh, well, they really need this and they're really good people and all that. So they come back. He comes back and he said, "Did you get us out of the thing?" He said, "No, I talked to him, really understood. And we signed up for another 5 years." And the team is going, "We sent you to get a divorce and you came back remarried and engaged." I mean, what?
Yeah.
But they could trust him with a lot of things, but they can't trust him to go play hardball when that's needed.
Yeah.
So these are great discussions for teams to have.
Yeah, that's so true, because I can think of situations where you might have somebody and you can trust them in a lot of areas, but there might just be one area that you don't trust them as much in. And I never even
My
really
wife,
that.
my wife will not let me go to the grocery store. I come home with stuff that she doesn't allow in the house and way more than, I figure, 2 pounds of that is good. 3 pounds is better. And she just doesn't let me do it. She doesn't let me do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Well, I think these are all amazing. I would say as we wrap up here, Dana, everybody should read the book. So we'll put a link in the show notes about the book. I know I'm going to keep rereading the book. To me, it's one, there are a few books in life that when you read them, you go, that is so simple, yet I could not see that.
Yeah.
I mean, just, to me, these 5 things show up. Now that I know them, I see them everywhere. I see them in other people. I see them in myself. I see, oh gosh, so much of even like how we could incorporate a lot of this in our career visioning process when we hire people.
Hiring, yeah.
I just see it in a million places that we can use it. So my recommendation.
Or your colleagues who are single, before they hire that person, to be joined together for life.
Yeah.
That's a big hire that you might ought to, check off the 5 before you.
Yeah, if they don't do like that, they'll be like me and be reading necessary endings quicker than what they thought that they needed to.
So true. So true. All right. So that if people want to reach out to you, do you still do speaking? Do you do corporate training? And if so, how do people find out more about all of that stuff from you, Dr. Cloud?
And or social media.
Yeah, if you go to drcloud.com.
Perfect.
There's contact info in there, whether it's speaking or consulting. There's also, I probably good if you go to that page and scroll down, there's 2 digital platforms that are very inexpensive. One of them is for personal growth and development, and that's the one called boundaries.me.
Oh.
That's the URL. I've got over 100 courses on there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And short form and long form, everything from relationships to teams to performance to anxiety to depression to marriage and parenting, divorce recovery. I mean, just life. And then I've got another platform called Lead You, it's leadyou.tv. But if they go to that site, they'll see it under Leadership University is what I call it. And that's an actual, back to your, how can companies do this? That's a online leadership development course path, but it includes those elements I talked about. So there's information, but it also has assignments that people's got to go do, and it brings their teams in, it brings their manager into it, it brings their peers and direct reports. And that I've got one company that's got hundreds of thousands of people that they offer to. So,
Wow.
All the way to single users. So Leadership University. And it's really, it's pretty cool actually. When instead of a talking head, what we did was we took 12 aspects of leadership and filmed it, went all around the world and filmed it in an Anthony Bourdain type TV show.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so instead of watching boring corporate training, you're going and embedded in a story, a great leadership story somewhere in the world. And then they did a great job of producing.
I didn't know about that. I'm excited to go check that out.
Neither. I mean,
Yeah,
I was sitting here as I'm finishing the book thinking, man, we need more of this. This needs to be in a format like Fierce Conversations where you could teach it constantly in your corporation.
Over and over. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And
Awesome.
and in Leadership University, trust is one of the modules.
Oh,
awesome.
great.
Good. Well, we'll put all the links to everything you just said in the show notes so that people can reach them. And remember, if you have not hit the subscribe button, please go ahead and do that now. And the greatest compliment you can give Dana and myself would be to pass this podcast along to anyone that you believe would benefit from these types of conversations. If you have a challenge, an opportunity, or a guest that you'd like to see on the show, be sure and reach out to us at info@everything life and real estate. Dr. Cloud, thank you so much. We appreciate your time today, Dana. And
So
I'll
good to see you guys.
next
Thank
week.
you. Thank you.
Be sure to subscribe for more business strategies and tactics to inspire you to live an abundant real estate life. Don't forget to rate and review so we can bring you the best content. Find this and other valuable information at everythinglifeandrealestate.com.